Hi everyone,
Hi
it's
guys.
Janu and Brendan, and we're gonna be recording this first code along for you. So let's get started. Yeah. Yeah, this is a great time to get to know Java, and by the end of all of this, you'll be fluent in Java, just like you're fluent in English.
Yep.
So that's the
And
goal.
just to recap, we're going to be going over declaring versus defining versus calling a method,
Yes.
how to write a return statement for a method, when to use parameters versus arguments, and also when to use the word this,
Yes.
and just general Java syntax.
Exactly. Before we get started, we're just going to explain a few things. Yeah, so first of all, what is an instance? An instance is an example of a class that's just like created somewhere. So here we have the restaurant class. If we go over to our main app, our main class, sorry, um, you will see here a new instance of the restaurant being created in our constructor or in the main method, excuse me. So every time you create or you run this app, you're making like a new restaurant who knows about a new chef, if that makes sense. So we've instantiated a new restaurant right here. We're calling a new chef. But we'll show you more examples of like instantiating as the course goes on, but we just wanted to introduce that. Also, real quick, in order to get all of this stencil code right here, code along one, when you start, you should already have a chef class, main class, restaurant class. Just head over to the CS15 website and scroll down to the code along section, and you can clone the stencil code from there. There's directions in Lab 0 if you want a refresher on how to clone code into your IntelliJ. But yeah, shall we get started?
Let's go for it.
Okay, so in the main class, we just want to think of it as something that just calls the program. So whenever we run our program, we're running it within the main class, and it will create a new restaurant that creates a new chef. That's pretty much all that the main class does right now. And this will like parallel our classes going forward. Every class you have or every project you do will have like a main class of some kind. It might have a different name, but it does the basic same thing.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So our first step is going to the restaurant class. We're going to, yeah, point out a few things that are here already. First of all, we have a constructor already in our class. So it says public restaurant chef, my chef. This thing right here is our constructor. It's not a method. It already exists within our class, and we can fill it with things that will happen every time a restaurant is created in the main app. Also in this class, already we have a prepare orders method. It's grayed out right here because we're not using it anywhere, but it does have these two qualities. It has a system out print line, so whenever you run this method, it should print taking orders in the terminal. Also, it's calling a method within the chef class, make pizza, which we'll elaborate on shortly. All right, so we're going to start out by opening the restaurant. We want to write a new method because we want our restaurant to actually open. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and write a new method. And we're just going to, yeah, go ahead and start writing. So public, we're going to start by writing public open restaurant. That's the name of our method. And opening it right here. But there's a red underline here, which means there's an error. So let's think about what went wrong here. Well, we have the keyword public, which we need when we're writing a method, or a keyword to say how visible this method is. In this case, we're doing public, but we don't have our type or our return type. So only a constructor will just have the word public. Every time you have a method, you need it to have a return type. So in this case, we just want our open restaurant to like basically put out a print line. We're going to just make it say something like open for business. And so we don't need it to have a return type of like an integer or something. We're just going to write void. But say we wanted a method that actually had to return a number, we would have to have the word int here for integer or double or anything.
String.
Any string, yeah, like any type of return. So the word in the middle here, this keyword is just what does this method actually return? All right, so we just declared the method.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Okay. And so as we can see, we just declared the method. This line right here, public void open restaurant, that's our method declaration. right? And so now we want to write the method definition. So we want to define what open restaurant does. And as we stated earlier, in this scenario, it's just going to print out opening for business. Woohoo. Okay. And so now we're going to go ahead, going to go to code along 1. We're going to compile and run. So if you remember, to compile, you go into the folder that of the program you're working on, in this case, code along 1. We're going to do javac .java, and then we're going to go back to src, and we're going to run java space code along 1, always remember case sensitive, .main. And so if we go ahead and run it, you'll see that's weird. Nothing got printed out. And if we think about it, let's think for a second. Okay, if we go to our main class, we're creating a new restaurant and we're creating a new chef. And so let's think, where would we want open restaurant to run? Because as you can see, we're not calling it anywhere. And so we want our restaurant to open whenever a new instance of a restaurant is created. So if we think about it, let's go ahead and do it in the restaurant constructor. So let's go ahead and write open restaurant. If you can see, Java's still a little angry. He's angry at us. And the reason why is because we need to call this .open restaurant. And that's because open restaurant is both the caller, or the restaurant class is both the caller and the receiver of the method open restaurant. In other words, restaurant is saying to itself, okay, I want to open. And so in this case, in the constructor, we're going to say this .open restaurant, because the restaurant class is calling on one of its own methods inside the constructor. So now we're going to go ahead and actually do one.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So our next step is, sorry, we're going to use another method that we've already written. So yeah, let's go over to our chef class now. And if you can see here, we have a method make pizza. And it takes in the string topping, which is great. And it's time for us to use this method in our restaurant class. So
let's-
even though we have this like make pizza method, it's being used somewhere. It's blue, it's not grayed out. It's being used somewhere. We can go back to the usage of it. It's in the prepare orders method. But when we ran this whole like method in our terminal, or we ran this app in our terminal, nothing actually happened. We didn't get the make pizza line get printed out, which is odd. Why is this happening? Well, because we're not actually calling the prepare orders method. So even though we are using the make pizza method in here, we're not calling the method that it's like nested inside. So we're not going to see anything. So let's go ahead and fix that. We're going to call prepare orders up here in the restaurant class. Yeah. So let's call prepare orders. Prepare orders. And let's just go ahead and see what happens.
Let's try to compile.
Yeah, let's try to compile. So I'm going to my code along class, cd code along 1 to compile. And in here I will say javac star.java. Oh no, there's an error. Well, what is going on? Why is there no error? It seems that this .prepare orders is missing an argument. So if we go back down to this method here, prepare orders, there is a parameter inside the method declaration, and that is a myChef of type chef. So this means that every time we use the method prepare orders, IntelliJ and Java will be expecting, IntelliJ in the language Java will be expecting an argument of a chef. So every time you declare a method and you have like, this method here, there's these parentheses. If you want that method to like take in a parameter of some kind, you will define that here. This word right here is the type of parameter, and this is just a variable name for the parameter that we're using. So we're passing in a chef, and we're giving that chef a name that we're using in here to reference it, my chef. This right here could say Bob, it could say Tom, it could say Brendan, it could say Janu, but it would just have to match whatever the word down here is as well. Okay, so now let's pass in a chef. Well, we need to pass in a chef that already exists, and if we go back to our main, every time we create a new restaurant, we create a new chef. So we can see in the constructor that the restaurant already knows about a chef. We want that same chef to be doing everything we have in here. Let's go ahead and say my chef. As you can see here, there's already a parameter, type, and variable name. And we're going to pass in that variable type into our prepare orders method. And this is an argument. I hope that was clear. But yeah. Okay, so we finally, call this prepare orders method with the right argument passed inside, and that argument is a chef that already exists. We create that chef in main. So why don't we try to compile again? Start Java C, start.java. Oh, great, it compiles. And now let's go over to our SRC, SRC folder, and we're gonna run this app. Again, like Brendan said, this is case sensitive. Perfect. So we open for business, taking orders, making pizza pepperoni. Woohoo. Shall we
Okay.
make a new method now?
Let's shall. Okay, so now we're gonna now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make a new method in the chef class. So we're gonna go over to the chef class, and for this method, we want a method that let's say cuts a pizza into a certain number of pieces. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna write the cut pizza from scratch. So walking through, please make sure you have the public type. And then we're gonna return void because it's not gonna return anything. It's just gonna be a print statement. And we're gonna call it cut pizza. So then when we're thinking about it, okay, we want to cut the pizza into a given number of slices. And we want to be able to pass through any number we would want. So cut it into five slices, cut it into 10 slices, doesn't really matter. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put in a parameter called num pieces. And if you can see, Java's angry because we didn't clarify what num pieces is. And so I want you guys to think for a second, what type of variable would num pieces be? In this case, it would be an int. So now if you can see, everything looks good so far. And it's always important to clarify that num pieces is a parameter because we're defining it within the method declaration. It's almost like a placeholder saying that num pieces can represent any type of value when we pass it through. And when we actually do pass through a certain number of pieces, let's say we want to pass through 5 or 6, that is called an argument. So always important to remember that. And so we're going to finish, now that we declared, now that we finished the method declaration, we're going to go ahead and define the method. In this case scenario, we're just going to want it to print out number of pieces. So we're going to do system.out.print, and we're going to print out cutting up plus num pieces plus slices. And if you can see right here, we're taking our argument, num pieces, and we're using it within the method cut pizza. But as I stated earlier, num pieces is a parameter and it's a placeholder. So then when we actually use cut pizza and we call cut pizza, whatever argument that we pass through, for example, 5, is going to replace this num pieces right here. So it's going to say cutting up 5 slices instead of num pieces. So always important to remember that. So now
Let's go
we're
ahead
gonna,
and call.
yeah, now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna call this method. So we're gonna go to the restaurant class and we're gonna go back to our prepare orders. Because if you remember, prepare orders is being called in a restaurant and it's being called every time we create a new restaurant. So let's go ahead and do our put our cut pizza method in prepare orders. But if we remember, cut pizza, it's not called by the restaurant, it's called by chef. And in prepare orders, we're passing through our chef instance. So we would do my chef dot cut pizza. And let's put in, I don't know, 8. And just to clarify, 8 is the argument because we're passing through an actual number. So when we call cut pizza, the num pieces that we stated earlier is going to get replaced by 8. And so let's go ahead and let's run it. CD into colon 1. Compile. Here we go. Cutting up
Beautiful.
8 slices. And really quickly, I just wanted to go through and say, what if we put in something else? Let's say we will put in the word 8. Do you guys think that would still work? Well, if we go ahead, Java's yelling at us. It's saying we provided a string, but it requires an int. And so that goes back to our chef class. We were defined the parameter to be an int. And so it's always important to remember that when you're passing through an argument within the method, to make sure it's the same type as the parameter you defined in the class. And so now we're going to go into work on another method called how many slices. So in this, I'm going to go ahead, go back to our chef class, and we're going to write a method called how many slices. And it's going to return how many slices for a given number of pizza. So if we have 8 pizza, and 5 slices, it's going to return 8 times 5, which is 40. So we're going to start off, I'm going to do public, but I'm going to stop for a second because in this method, how many slices, we actually want it to return something. We want it to return an integer. In this case, it would be however many slices we want. So in this case, we would want to write int. And so if we go ahead, how many slices, now we got to figure out what we should use as parameters. So if you remember, to get how many slices, we need to know 1, how many pizzas we have, and 2, how many slices per pizza. So for parameters, we would want to pass through num pizza and num slices. If you can see, Java's still yelling at us, and that's because we need to clarify the type of the parameter. So in this case, we would want it to be int and int, because in the end, we're returning an int. So if we go ahead, and as I said earlier, this method is going to return something. And so it's really important that we use the word return to tell Java, to signal Java that, hey, we're returning something. So if we look at the parameters we have num pizza and num slices. So we're going to go ahead and return num pizza times num slices. And as I stated earlier, this value right here needs to match the return type int. So because num pizza is an int and num slices is an int, the return type will also be an int.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go ahead and
Well, we aren't actually calling
Yeah.
this method, but we
If
could
we-
do a quick print line just to show.
Okay. Yeah. So we're just going to do a quick print line of illustrating this because how many slices returns just a number.
Mhm.
We want to write it within a print statement. So we're just going to go ahead go to prepare orders and pass through how many slices. And we remember how many slices is a method of chef. So we want to make sure that my chef within prepare orders is calling how many slices. In this case, we're going to say 8 and 5. And so really quickly, if we go ahead, we're going to go into code along 1, going to compile, going to go back, we're going to run it. There we go, cutting up 8 slices, and it's going to return 40.
Perfect.
And so that is the end of our little code along demo.
Yes.
If you guys have any questions about this or confused by, any of this, the conceptual understanding, feel free to reach out to us on Ed or attend project hours for questions. We're always here to help. Hopefully this will help you guys with both finishing Ratatouille and for future assignments like AnnieBot. We appreciate you guys for watching and thank you guys so much. Bye.
Oh.